Hi everyone. Let's take a look at problem 18-8, which deals with alternative dividend policies for the Keenan Company in 2004. Okay, well in 2004, the Keenan Company paid dividends totaling $3.6 million on net income of $10.8 million. Now, 2004 was a normal year, and for the past 10 years, earnings have grown at a constant rate of 10%. However, in 2005, earnings are expected to jump to $14.4 million, and the firm expects to have profitable investment opportunities of $8.4 million. It's predicted that Keenan will not be able to maintain the 2005 level of earnings growth. The high 2005 earnings level is attributable to an exceptionally profitable new product line introduced this year, and the company will return to its previous 10% growth rate. Okay, now Keenan's target debt ratio is 40%. Let's take a look at A, and let's work on 1A first. We need to calculate Keenan's total dividends for 2005 if it follows each of the following policies. Okay, so on 1A, we are assuming that its 2005 dividend payment is set to force dividends to grow at the long-run growth rate in earnings. Okay, well we know the long-run growth rate is equal to 10%. Okay, so the way I would solve this is I would calculate the growth, which is 1 plus the long-run, the 10% growth rate, right, which is constant over years, and then I would multiply that by the amount of the 2004 dividends, right? That was $3.6 million. Okay, and once I do that, what we come up with is $3,960,000, and that represents the dividend payment if we force dividends to grow at the long-run growth rate in earnings. Okay, now let's take a look at A2. Oh, but before I do that, let me hit the F2 key again so you can see that all I'm doing is taking 1.1, which is the growth rate, or 110%, times the current level of dividends. Okay, now in 1A2, we are going to calculate dividends assuming it continues the 2004 dividend payout ratio. Okay, well, in 2004 we paid dividends of $3.6 million, and if we divide that by net income of $10.8 million, what we come up with is, let me put an equal sign in front so it does the math, and turn that into a percentage. Okay, we come up with a 33.33% payout ratio. Okay, then if we take the 2005, using that same ratio, and if we take that times 2004 net income, we can calculate the 2005 dividends. Okay, so in 2005 dividends, we assume a 33% payout ratio, and we're expecting 2005 net income to be $14.4 million. So we put in 14.4. Okay, I want to format that. If we multiply the first one times the second term, we come up with 4.8 as our as the dividends we would expect to pay if we continued the 2004 dividend payout ratio. Next, let's take a look at A3. Okay, on A3 we read that the company uses a pure residual policy with all distributions in the form of dividends. That's 40% of the $8.4 million investment is financed with debt. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is calculate the equity financing. So let's take that 8.4 million of profitable investment opportunities and multiply that times the percentage that relates to equity financing, and that would be 1 minus the target debt ratio of 40%, or 60%, but I'll do it the long way. Okay, put an equal sign so we can do the math. And what that represents is the equity financing. Okay, once we have the equity financing, then we would drop in the net income of 14,400,000. That's our net income again, right? And so if we wanted to come up with the amount of dividends under a pure residual policy, we would then take the 14.4 net income minus the amount that would be financed through equity financing. Okay? Now, I realize I wrote this sort of upside down, where we're taking cell C27 and backing off cell C26. Normally we would write that the other way, but I think you understand the point, which is we determine the net income and back off the equity financing using a pure residual policy approach. Okay, let me format that a little bit. And now let's take a look at A4. Okay, now I've slid the screen up so we have a little bit more room to work on A4. Now A4 says the company employs a regular dividend plus extras policy, with the regular dividend being based on the long-run growth rate and the extra dividend being set according to the residual policy. Okay, let me go ahead and bold the other answers first because we're going to use them on A4. Okay, so there's the answer for A1, A2, and A3. Okay, so on A4, under the regular dividends plus extras policy, we know that the regular dividends is the long-term rate of the 10% times last year's dividend amount. Okay, so that is essentially what we already computed in A1. So the first thing we do is we determine the regular dividends, which is that amount. We calculate it the exact same we did in A1. Let's just label that as regular dividends. Okay, then we take a look at the residual policy, and it called for dividends of 9,360, which we calculated by coming up with the equity financing portion, looking at net income, and computing how much the dividends should be. But under the regular dividends plus extra policy, what we need to do is drop in the residual amount and then compute the difference. Let me label this first. The 936 would be the dividends under the residual policy. Okay, so now what we would need to do is compute the difference. And again, normally you would write these going the other way, but we would take the dividends under the residual and subtract off the regular dividends under the long-term growth approach, the long-term growth rate, and we would come up with 5.4 million. Go ahead and format that the same way, and that would be our dividends and our answer to A4. Okay, now I've gone ahead and bolded the various solutions, and we can rely on those when we answer part B. I've also slid up so you can see all of the bolded solutions. which of the preceding policies would you recommend? And then the text also would like us to restrict our choices to the ones listed and provide your answer. Okay, well, when we look at the various approaches, I believe the fourth policy, which is based on a regular dividend with some extra, it seems fairly logical. The reason that we reach that conclusion is that it allows us to maintain the correct capital budget we need so that we can invest in the $8.4 million of profitable investment opportunities we have, and at the same time it sends the correct signal to our investors. They're getting more of a dividend than the normal 10% growth rate, but certainly not 100% more as indicated under the pure residual policy approach, or the 100% more of what we could give out given what opportunities we